Hey everybody, welcome back. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you've started 2024 on the right foot and are looking forward to the rest of the year. In today's video, we're going to have a look at Cardano. Now, it's been a while since we've visited Cardano, over 2 months, and if you've watched that video recently, you'll recognize that a lot of these lines and indicators haven't changed, or if they have, very barely. And that's because I think they do a good job of showing where Cardano has been, where it's come from, where it went, and where it could be going. It does a good job, in my opinion, of breaking down the cycles in a way. And another reason is that when I made this video using these indicators about 2 months ago, this hadn't really happened yet. You know, it was 1st of November, I think, when I made my Cardano video, and I think I sort of said that we could see a bit of a pump here, could see a rally, but ultimately I think we'll fade. I didn't think we would come sort of above this high from February. But of course, I was definitely proven wrong. And if you go watch that video, you can sort of understand my rationale behind it. But obviously, that hasn't played out. And we're doing something totally new now. And what is interesting to me is the immediate similarity that stands out to me here compared to the last cycle is during the Bitcoin halving. We can see after the COVID crash, we had very similar moves up, where we, had a rally, went sideways, and then shot up, traded sideways, shot up, traded sideways, shot up, traded sideways, until we eventually reached a top of 15 cents at the time, and then had a bit of a retracement, just in time for us to explode into the bull run. This is the logarithmic graph as well, so these movements here are way more drastic than they look, realistically. And maybe we're seeing something similar play out here. If we take a look at if we take this as our low and we take this as our low, we'll be a little more picky with our data. And we'll say we've had two rallies, two rallies and oscillations. So first rally oscillation, second rally oscillation. That's what we're currently looking at. First rally oscillation, second rally oscillation. We can see that Cardano went up under 300% over about 3.5 months. Again, if we just pull up a similar time frame and a similar chart to here, we can see that it hasn't gone up as much, but it hasn't gone on for as long either. And also looking at this, we can see that this one took place during the halving. It was May time of 2020, and this is of course taking place in October of 2023. So the times don't line up perfectly, but again, a lot of cryptocurrency doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. So, like these movements here didn't happen exactly 4 years later, as the 4-year cycle sort of suggests it might if it's going to follow a trend, but they did happen during a similar time frame, with these orange ranges sort of indicating the bear run. Again, the one in 2018 that came after the 2017 bull market, and the one in 2022 that came after the 2021 bull market. And again, this white line sort of indicates when we have a bit of a resurgence towards the end of the bear market year. So we have 2018, we see poor price action all around. Same thing here, comes to basically end of 2022, poor price action. We have a bit of a revival, and we see the same thing here. But ultimately, it does close the year or trend towards being poor price action for the rest of the year. Except, of course, for this year, where instead of trending down like we did here, and even ultimately going even lower, putting in an even lower low for that cycle, Cardano has actually rallied significantly, like the rest of the crypto space, which is a bit unexpected. You could compare it to this sort of a move here, where Cardano started rallying again at the end of the post-bear market year, the pre-halving year. Cardano started to rally at the start of this one, and then maybe if COVID never came along, Cardano would never have had this big sell-off. Again, we've kind of spoken about this before, so it's kind of up to you what you believe, but Bitcoin does usually have big sell-offs in and around the halving. Before COVID was a thing, and potentially this year coming as well, we might have a big sell-off. It's, of course, I can't tell the future, I can just tell you what has happened, and that has happened before. But again, you could chalk this up to COVID, so you could just sort of cut this negative price action out and sort of put this low here, this high, and say that would have trended up like this. However, I am a little bearish just in terms of what is sustaining this bull run. And again, it sort of goes back to macro, where the conditions for a bull run aren't really there, especially with America, with basis points, the rate hike still being above 5 basis points. And we haven't even started cutting yet. I mean, I know we've paused, which is usually a dovish sign, but it's still not enough, in my opinion, for the crypto space. I could be wrong. We could be in the middle of the start of a bull run. I don't know. But I do sort of see something like this happen. And if we take a look at rate cuts, we do actually see that the price will drop. I'm going to do a video on this in the next few days and release it sometime before the 6th of January, hopefully, just to show sort of how the Fed have raised and cut rates before and how Bitcoin, I'll be using Bitcoin in the video, has reacted to it. And we often see, again, I'm working on it and I don't have all the data at the moment, but what I've seen so far is that when the Fed starts cutting, the price of Bitcoin drops. And when it pauses, Bitcoin rallies and the altcoin space rallies. And we've had a pause since around September time, I'm pretty sure. I don't think we've raised since September. I can't really remember, to be honest with you, but we've been paused during this time. And the whole of the crypto space has moved up with it. Once we start to cut rates, reduce rates, we often see prices come down. So we could still see a movement like this. It would sort of coincide with when they plan to start cutting rates, which the bonds market, I think, is factoring in for sort of February time, January time. So we could see sort of a pullback. Again, it might not be a pullback to this degree. We might come back to 40-cent Cardano. I can't tell you. And I will have the video out on Bitcoin comparing the cuts later this week. I really would recommend you check that out. I think it's really important, and I want to get it out sooner rather than later because I feel like time is very crucial with that sort of information, because we could see a pullback any time now. We could see it play out a very similar way, where we have a rally before the halving and then a big sell-off before the halving, and then sort of once we put in a low after that sell-off, it's only up from there. And Cardano is an altcoin that I would trust enough that it will do well the next bull run. I mean, it's been around for 2, and it did extremely well for both. So in my mind, there's no reason for me to doubt it going forward. It's sort of it stood the test of time, so I can't knock it for that reason. But again, just a very quick recap. We're seeing a rise here, seeing a rise here. Fed cutting rates often results in poor price action. Also, Fed cut rates during COVID, during this time when it started happening, started printing money, and of course prices crashed. But you could say that was because of a pandemic scare, whatever you want. You could also argue that this sell-off will be counteracted by the spot Bitcoin ETF being approved. People are factoring January as the approval. I think it's the last time the SEC has to accept it by. Lots of hype around that. So we could see that counteract the negative price action. It could contribute to the negative price action. It could be a big sell the news event like we saw with Ethereum's Shanghai and Ethereum's futures contract and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the air. It's just to be aware of a lot of it is happening mid-early January, potentially. We still don't know. And I mean, if there isn't a spot Bitcoin ETF approval for whatever reason, I mean, you can expect the price to go in the bin, basically, which again would sort of coincide with this sort of a time. But it's all very up in the air at the moment, and if it's more of a gamble than anything. If you want to take that risk, all power to you, but there's no way of knowing what will happen. So it is basically gambling, especially if you're going to sort of trade around this sort of period. Taking a look at Cardano on its Bitcoin pair, we can see that, again, a very similar chart to the last video. And again, I didn't want to change it because I'd like to go back to what I said before. And kind of what I said before is that we should expect the price to drop on the Bitcoin pair as Bitcoin claims back more value from the altcoin space, and it'll sort of do this up until 2025, in my opinion. So we sort of have the next year still for Bitcoin to claim back a lot of its price. But funnily enough, we can see a very similar thing happening again, where at the end of the bear run last cycle and before the previous bull run, we had a wick above and then a drop down below. And when I made this video, which was beginning of November, if we zoom right in, we hadn't quite gone above. And in fact, there was a big pump waiting to happen literally the day after. And I said that I would expect Cardano to stay below this line. And maybe we might see a move like this close to the bull run, but I ultimately said we'll stay below this line for a little while. Again, I was wrong. I am often wrong. This stuff is very hard to hit on the head, especially when you're giving very precise predictions, like I try to do, or try not to do really, but I often end up giving them anyway. Instead, we saw a move up past like this, and if we zoom into the previous one, we can see it was quite a solid move up, and it actually bounced from these sort of lows up above our resistance of 1,000 Satoshis. If we zoom up to what we had today, we didn't go as low as these levels, as the 500 Satoshi mark. We just wicked below the 1000, went as low as sort of 800 Satoshis, and then rallied up quite impressively again. So maybe we don't see Cardano go below sort of 800 Satoshi level. Maybe we've sort of slotted ourselves a peg higher on the Bitcoin pair. it's very difficult to say, because we could very easily break down below, especially if there is bad news around the crypto space over the next few months, or if there is rate cuts and Bitcoin plays out the same way that it has the last few times and the price drops because of these rate cuts. It's difficult to say. If that does play out, we could see Cardano lose value against Bitcoin, and maybe we could come down to these 500 Satoshi levels. I'm not quite sure. But again, it would sort of play out fairly well, where if we take a look here and see how long we spent, once we broke above this range, how long it took for us to get into a bull run, it was about a year. If we go here and take where we broke above, and if we go about a year, it brings us very close to 2025 bull run. You know what I mean? It brings us to the end of 2024. So again, all things, the points that I made and the rationale that I based those points off still do hold up, even if my short-term analysis was completely wrong, where I said we'll probably stay below this for a little while. The data is still sort of playing out in a similar way. Another thing that I spoke about very briefly in the last video is sort of the idea of maybe diminishing returns as the cycles go on their Bitcoin pair. This is sort of something that happens with a lot of altcoins, and as Cardano has cemented itself as a cryptocurrency that's hanging around, we do sort of expect this, and this has happened. Like if you take a look at the returns of Cardano on its USD pair, you can see that the first cycle Cardano went parabolic and it did like a 200x, something crazy like that, and then the second cycle it still did brilliantly, but it was only like a 50-60x, something only, but you know, it was much less. So maybe this cycle we can see something also much less, and the Bitcoin pair might help us plan that out during a very basic rough line that doesn't really come from anywhere. I'm just sort of lining up where we had highs from the first cycle bull run and the second cycle bull run. We could see Cardano, if it peaks mid 2025, we could see it come up to about 5,000 Satoshis. That's probably not too unreasonable to say. If we take a look at how far it fell from cycle, it went down about 27% from the first cycle to the second cycle. If we go down 27% from here, we can see it would bring us in around 4,500 Satoshis. So again, sort of following this very basic line and the amounts that we've dropped potentially from first cycle to second cycle, if we drop a similar amount, it does put us in that sort of 4,500 to 5,000 Satoshi level for where we can expect Cardano to go in 2025 if there is a bull run, which I believe there probably will be. Funnily enough, I did make the point last video with these sort of arrows saying that with these dips and these rallies, they look very similar to what we had before we had this pump. And I said it's probably too late now, as these time zones don't really match up. But funnily enough, even though these time zones don't match up at all, it still played out a very similar way when these indicators played out, which is kind of funny to me, because we just saw the same pattern and we had a pump, and that's what we've seen. We've had these two patterns and a pump the last couple of months. And what happened here, we sort of put in a high. How high did we move? If we zoom in so that we can get a better look, if we say take our second dip to our high, it was 130%. If we go to today's and we take our second dip to our high, it was about 100%. So again, similar moves. Maybe we've got another bit to go with this sort of pump, but over here we did just see a shoot up and then a shoot straight back down. So maybe it plays out a bit differently, where we oscillate for a little bit, have another wake up, another 30%, and then pull back. It's hard to say. Again, these are just sort of very interesting little bits of information that might be useful to you. To me, a lot of things still point towards the direction of we've had a good few months of bullish price action, not only on US dollar pairs, but on Bitcoin pairs against altcoins, where altcoins have outperformed Bitcoin in a lot of cases. But from historic data, what we know is coming, like the Fed cuts and how Bitcoin has reacted to that before, and in turn the rest of the alt market, a few things do point towards negative price action. I want to contribute the spot Bitcoin ETF as a positive thing, a positive price mover, but I honestly don't know, because in the past we have had big events that people look forward to, and ultimately the price, you know, drops 6%, 7% on the day. Again, referring to the ETH merge, the Shanghai upgrade. Very quickly, before I finish on the Bitcoin pair, I will point out this 3,000 sat resistance / support line. We can see this is a very key point, as when Cardano does break above this line, it sort of does very well in the immediate short term afterwards, and it sort of indicates kind of a bull run. We are still well below the sort of 3,000 sat level. We're at, you know, 1,500. So we're a 2x on our Bitcoin pair away, which means basically that Cardano needs to outperform Bitcoin drastically. And it only usually ever does this in very short periods of time. We can see once it does start, it usually does go completely parabolic. Where we've seen great price action movement here compared to what we've seen in the past, where we have, you know, moves of 500% in under 2 months on a Bitcoin pair, we're not quite there yet, in my opinion. And even though we have had great price action here, it's been 100% over 2 months, over, you know, more than 2 months. So for me, still not quite where we want to be in terms of a bull run. But again, I can always be wrong. I was wrong last video. I could very well be wrong this video. Although last video, all the points that I based my rationale off were correct and have continued to play out. So maybe make your own decisions off these rationales. Again, we've seen these moves here. Looks like it's playing out from this point on. It was about a year afterwards when we started our bull run. If we take a year afterwards from when we broke above here, it brings us to the start of 2025. QE often causes negative price action in the crypto space from past events, as I will show in a later video. Please check that out when it comes out. On the US dollar pair, we saw rallies like these. Immediately afterwards, this sort of second downward movement, which we saw last cycle. And then after about a 130% move up, we saw a pullback, and here we are up 160, 170% of a move up. So you could call that as well overdue, we're in borrowed time, or you could call that as we've broke through this 130% line, so we're not going to have a pullback. Points for you, or decisions for you to make. I think that about wraps it up for me and what I want to say. Again, Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for checking out the video and for watching till the end. Really does help out the channel a lot, and it means a huge amount to me. Comment down below where you think Cardano is headed. I do always reply to you, and if you want a specific video, hit me up. I will get it out for you if there's enough data. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care and peace.